As you walk along in your average day, there is much you take for granted. The clothes on your back, your everyday journey from A to B, even your identity. Now stop for a second and imagine what it would be like if you woke up one day and all that was gone. Your name, your identity, everything that forms the fabric of your life. You've just entered a day in the life of Second Sight's lead character, John Vaddick. Over the next 20 minutes, you will have exclusive behind-the-scenes access to the production team that have worked tirelessly over the last 2.5 years to give you Second Sight. Second Sight was created by a team with a well-established background in action-adventure gameplay, Free Radical Design. Based in Nottingham, England, Free Radical's pedigree is second to none. The creative team's past successes prior to forming Free Radical include Perfect Dark, GoldenEye, and subsequently the Time Splitters series. But rather than dining out on past glories, Free Radical have boldly set out to redefine stealth action gaming with a story-driven Second Sight. They've added a new dimension to the genre, which is sure to establish Second Sight as a classic of its time. Free Radical director David Doe tells us how the production team came together and where the idea for the game came from.
So Free Radical was formed in 1999. The 5 founder members had all previously worked at Rare, and 4 of us had worked on GoldenEye, and all of us had worked on Perfect Dark. So kind of were looking for a new challenge, very much wanted to do our own kind of IP and our own games, and so the idea to leave and set up Free Radical. When we formed Free Radical, we were very keen to do a story-based game. The games we worked on previously had both been very kind of narrative-driven. I mean, one was a movie license, the other was original. And Second Sight started really as an idea of trying to tell a story in an interesting way in a game. First of all, there was the kind of idea of having flashbacks. And that was really, the flashback idea started because we wanted to have some kind of interactivity in the narrative, so that it wasn't entirely passive throughout. And that seemed a good way of kind of having you see things before and after, and maybe to change things. It's often said about games that, you know, wouldn't it be great to have a game where you actually change the story? The reality of it is, if you have a game where the story changes in a kind of like fairly ad hoc manner, the possibilities suddenly spiral out of control, and it's difficult to justify creating the assets for the game to cover all of the eventualities. So Flashback allowed us to have change in the narrative, but to keep the whole thing under control.
But with Free Radical's success with straight shoot-'em-ups like Time Splitters 1 and 2, how did they hope to achieve success with a story-driven game?
Well, the initial kind of idea behind it was this thing about having a man with psychic powers, but in the kind of the normal real world. There was certain sections of the game where we decided that in terms of the past timeline, the first couple of levels, you wouldn't have access to the psychic powers. It would be a bit of a surprise as you got through to it. And we wanted to tell this story of this character and his kind of journey through that. And just basically kind of exploring the idea of having this man with these psychic powers in quite a realistic setting.
With Second Sight, the whole thing was built around this narrative structure and story from the start. So going into that project, that was a major goal, was let's make sure we do the story really, really well.
Why can't I remember anything?
Also by that stage, because the company had matured and grown in experience and things, Time Splitters 2 was the first time we'd done really proper kind of cinematic bookending cutscenes to the levels. Second Sight, that was a prerequisite for doing it, was that every level would have to have an in and out cutscene, defining it and pushing the story along.
I gotta get this door open. I guess that switch out there opens the door. If I could just press it somehow. I don't understand what's going on at all. And what happened to those straps holding me to the bed?
So with the main idea for the game developing organically, the team had to get to work creating the character of John Vadek and the other people he would interact with, not to mention the world in which they would exist.
The idea for the characters in Second Sight was to make them a lot more realistic than the ones in previous games we worked on. We wanted to steer away from the cartoony style, and the serious nature of the story works better with a more realistic style of character. So that's what we were trying to aim for, while still keeping the stylisation that our company is recognised for.
Excuse me, I'm Vadek, Dr. John Vadek.
The biggest challenge for the backgrounds was basically you've got two very distinct time periods. You've got the A time frame, you've got the B time frame, and the idea really was to try and kind of create a separation between the two. I'd say probably the major way we did that was through things like colour, like the B timeline.
What am I doing here?
You're here to change things for the better, John.
It's supposed to have happened before the A timeline, so it's much, the colours are much more like muted. It's supposed to be like the past, so we're trying to try to push that to the fore. Whereas the colours in the A timeline are much more saturated and much more rich.
I don't get this. Jane Wilde killed in action? What the?
No one else can say that.
John Vadek.
When I started writing music for a level, I'd look at the level and see what tasks there were to perform, how heavy the AI would be and how much gunfighting there would be. And that would give you clues as in how the music would start.
There were difficulties in swapping from a more stylised approach to a more realistic approach, because obviously, because you're trying to copy the real world, you've got to be a lot more spot on. You can't afford to have little flourishes and things that you wouldn't see in the real world.
When I started writing music, I watched a lot of films that were pertinent to the game we were making, but the one that really stuck in my mind was The Shining. Although the film itself isn't very similar to the game we were making, the music really did it for me. It gave such a tense experience just watching that film, which was basically a few people in a house, and that really inspired me a lot.
When you're modelling a level for Second Sight, the first stage you do is basically the modelling. This is a wireframe model of the first room in the animal lab. You'll probably see more realism in the colour schemes in, for instance, the B timeline, whereas the A timeline it's quite a lot richer. We use a lot more film techniques like colour filtering and things like that to try and give it a more sort of cinematic appearance.
So what's all this about? Look, I'm glad to be of help, but one day's notice is barely enough time for me
We're
to get
out
on.
of time, Dr. Vadek. Can you handle a sidearm?
They said my role was strictly advisory.
Then advise yourself to get some weapons training. My squad doesn't nursemaid tourists.
I'm in a squad now?
We'll explain it all at the briefing. 1800 hours. Be there.
And it is the cinematic cut scenes in Second Sight that drip feed the player with the small clues that propel them back and forth through time. Lead animator James Cunliffe takes us through the process of these short pieces of drama.
Psychic phenomena at a POW camp on the Belo-Russian border.
The effort that we put into keeping the cutscenes short and the information concise was quite remarkable, really. Making sure that the viewer had enough information but not too much, and in as concise a time frame as possible.
John Vadek.
Dr. Vadek.
What happened? I need to remember.
The most difficult thing about animating Second Sight was the fact that the characters are pseudo-realistic, and the pressures put on the animators to create realistic motion were very high, certainly compared to games that we have worked on in the past.
John Vadek.
Dr. Vadek.
What happened? I need to remember.
The way that we create some of the more wacky animations in any of our computer games is we act it out.
No, I'm the reason it's going to end. Oh. No, I'm the reason it's going to end. Oh. No, I'm the reason it's going to end. Oh. No.
The animation department is made up of some very talented, classically trained animators who are used to being able to express themselves, and on a normal working day, you'll see the animation department running around, rolling, acting, pushing people.
Hey, come on, Harry, buzz me through.
What you got there? Jesus, this guy a mess or what?
That's nothing. You should have seen him before.
Guess he won't be dating again.
Like he's ever getting out. He's a psycho killer.
Sweet, what did he do?
That's classified.
I don't know. Why do they keep loose like this alive anyway?
Lab once.
As what, a crash test dummy?
Who knows? He's been wired up to a box all summer.
Hey, did you see that? Think he can hear us? He can hear all he wants. Hey Doc, more monkey juice over here.
More monkey juice over here.
Ah yes, be careful with this one.
Be careful with that one. Let me see. Hold his arm above him.
They're a bit bizarre, really, I suppose, from the outside if you watch them.
Hydrocar pipeline station, sir. More incoming.
So who exactly will John Vadek meet in his mission to discover the truth and flee his captors?
John Vadek's journey through the story of Second Sight, he meets up with a variety of characters. I guess the primary people that you deal with are your allies in the Winter Ice mission in the past.
Who were those guys?
Not Russian regulars, some kind of guerrilla force.
And that's kind of, it's fun because we got to introduce you to a squad in a kind of training environment. So you meet them all individually and they have their own little specialities. So there's weapons and kind of like, there's the sniper and there's the communications guy, whatever. So you kind of meet up with all of them, and we wanted to have this thing where we kind of got you to meet all your friends and then tell you that things had gone really badly for your friends, and that perhaps everyone was thinking it was your fault that it had gone badly for them. So it's a kind of like a motivational thing.
Let's take a moment to have a closer look at some of the special powers John Vadek will be using to save both himself and his comrades in arms.
A big thing for us and a big exciting feature of the game are the psychic powers. John acquires them one by one as he goes through the game. And we kind of like build up your psychic toolkit as you go through. The first thing we introduce is telekinesis. Really, that's probably the single most useful power you have, and also probably the most interesting in terms of gameplay. So really, it manifests itself initially through the ability to remotely activate switches, things like that, and then to manipulate props. So to pick up, say, a case or a TV or something and throw it around. And with that, it opens up a lot of fun things you can do. So if there's an enemy in the game or another character, I can throw the thing at them, try and hit them with it and damage them that way. Or you can be much more subtle. I could remotely manipulate, say, the door on a cupboard or something, so the guard goes to look what's going on and then I slip past him. Or maybe the guy just freaks out when he sees the thing bobbing around in front of his face, and use that to scare people. That then becomes a bit stronger as you go through the game, to the extent that you can then use it on live people.
Return to your posts. Vadek has left the area.
So the psychic healing ability basically allows John at any time to transfer his psychic health into real physical health. And that was very freeing in terms of setting up the gameplay of the game, because we're no longer in a position where you have a level where In many games, if you screw up in one bit, take a bit of damage, it's kind of like you're going to press restart, you want to go back, or you're scavenging around for health packs and things. We don't have that. We let him go through, take damage, recover. Allows us to make it a lot more kind of free-form for the person playing the game. You can experiment, you can get hurt, but still get through the level. Also allows us to make it a lot harder in some places, because later in the game we can throw a lot of stuff at you, because we know that if you balance your psychic powers, you can kind of recover from it. It also, a big thing in the game is also interacting with other characters, and the healing ability. At times in the game you have someone else with you, and you use your psychic healing in order to protect them and to keep them alive. So works well.
Thanks, Vatic.
The other psychic abilities are the kind of psychic attack abilities, which are, they're kind of more fanciful and more kind of like psychic shotgun effect. I do this, I knock a guy across the room. Also, there's an upgrade to that, which is a kind of like a psychic radial blast, which is almost like a panic button. When John's really hemmed in and everyone's closed in on him when the gun's pointing at his head, you can do this thing and just knock everyone flying and then run. Obviously, it has a big psychic cost to you, so it's kind of like balanced in the gameplay. The charm ability is the kind of improvised stealth ability. So anywhere in the game when you have this, you can use charm to effectively become invisible to people. It carries a penalty, but if you try to use it, if you're standing right in front of someone and you can't try and pull off this kind of Houdini, I'm not really here, then it just wipes out. You can't do that. It also doesn't work against remote kind of mechanical monitoring devices. So I could be trying to sneak through a room, tippy on the charm, going past the people, but if there's a camera there, then the whole thing will go wrong for you. So it's kind of like you up the stakes if you're using charm. The projection ability is our kind of interpretation of the astral travel thing, which is a kind of traditional psychic ability, as it were. That's fun because it opens up a lot of abilities for us to do kind of dual key puzzles where maybe you have to activate something in some place while you are somewhere else. Some timing puzzles. And then we also juice up the projection by turning it into a possession. That means I take my projected character and I move into another one's body, take control of someone. That's a lot of fun. So you take NPCs, you can move them out of the way, you can make them shoot at each other. It opens up a lot of ways of dealing with the kind of setup and the level and working your way through. If you want to run and gun, you can run and gun. If you want to sneak around, you can sneak around. What's fun is when you kind of combine them. So telekinesis. I pick some guy up, I hold him up in the air, I switch to my gun and I can shoot him then. I mean, we were playing the other day and there was a fun thing I suggest people go and do in the game.
The company helping to bring the power and the carnage of Second Sight to the public are international games publishers, Codemasters.
Codemasters was very interested in Second Sight because obviously coming from a developer like Free Radical with such a good track record, with good titles behind them, that for a starter was something that we were very interested in. But also given that Second Sight is such an original title, the storyline is so integral to it, it's driven by the storyline, it's quite filmic in its style. Obviously the psychic powers element is something that's very different and up until now hasn't been done in quite the way that it's been introduced in Second Sight. I think that when you combine all of those elements, it seemed like an incredibly strong title and something that we were interested in pursuing.
But with the action games marketplace already flooded, how will Second Sight stand out from the crowd?
With Second Sight having created this fairly rich environment to play through the story of the game, we didn't feel it was necessary to go and put cheats in the game. I think for people playing it, the replayability will come from going back and doing things in different ways.
Second Sight stands apart, I think, from games that are coming out because it's very story-based and the story has been really worked into the game. So it's not just sort of tacked on as an afterthought, it's very much integral to how the game plays and how you progress through the game.
I guess one of the things that works really well in a game for me is you kind of want people to be doing aspirational, cool things. And the more you can show the player that they're doing a cool thing, the more rewarding it is for them.
You're about to take a journey of discovery with new challenges, goals, and most of all, new powers. You've had a glimpse into the life of John Vatic, and it's time for you to take control of that life. Thank you for joining us in this look into Second Sight.